Hey everybody, and welcome to the Joe Yevoli podcast. This podcast is about talking to people who have dedicated their lives to the game of lacrosse and learning about who they are, how they got to where they are today, and what they do to improve themselves and their teams. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Joe Yevoli, and if you want to be able to ask questions to upcoming guests and suggest topics or interviews you'd like to hear, subscribe to my newsletter at joeyevoli.com. Today on the show, we have the new head coach of Harvard men's lacrosse, Gerry Byrne. Coach Byrne and I got a chance to talk about a lot of things like commitment, dealing with expectations, positive coaching, committing intellectually and emotionally, and much more. Here's my interview with Coach Byrne. Coach Byrne, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to talk, but let's get started like I always do. How'd you get started playing lacrosse?
You know what? Mostly by default. Being from Levittown, the sport was really ingrained in our culture there, but I'd always played baseball and basketball. And as I've gotten older, I'd gotten less coordinated, to be honest with you. And I grew 6 inches in 1 year. And I was in the process of getting cut by every sport at Chaminade. And, you know, my mother came in, totally challenged me, pointed out that my older brother had become a really good player, and basically told me to get my ass off the couch and try this sport.
So you grew 6 inches in 1 year, and you
Correct.
were, and I'm going to assume you weren't cut from the basketball team. Is that right?
I was cut from the basketball team. I was always had the ball, and then they want you to be a forward, and
right.
I went from being, it was an awkward phase.
Right.
It was just let's just call it late 70s, early 80s, awkward phase, big hair, really skinny. I was skinny before I grew, and then I looked like a pipe cleaner after I grew. And so I did not make the JV or varsity basketball team at Chaminade after making the team as a freshman. And so I told this story a few times. I got cut from every team I tried out for at Chaminade, and I ultimately made the JV team. I had never played organized lacrosse before then. Again, after my mom chastised me and basically said, "I know your brother's a better athlete than you, but he's on a college team right now, and if he can do it, you can do it." And and I can tell you the only reason I made the JV team at Chaminade is because another Levittown guy was the head coach, Jack Moran. And I think I kind of look like my brother, my brother Steve.
Right.
We were kind of built the same way, so he knew I wasn't adopted. And so if there's some sort of DNA connected, because Jack had coached my older brother at Levittown Division High School on the JV team there, and said, maybe this guy has something. So I played attack my junior year at Chaminade, didn't play at all. And then my senior year, I became a defenseman.
Gotcha. And then so, especially since you started playing so late in your high school career, what made lacrosse stand out as the sport that you were going to play at the next level?
Primarily I didn't get cut from the team, so it seemed like a really good option at the time. I didn't have any illusions or delusions of grandeur. My junior year, picking it up for the first time, I had some friends and friends not from Chaminade, friends from my hometown, and kind of fell in love with the routine of kind of wall ball and curb ball, curbs in Levittown. So that's how I learned how to scoop the ball. So I got engaged in the routine and kind of the hunger to be good for the first time in a few years, because I did go through those awkward few years of growing and teenage years and getting used to your body again. And so I had friends in town, again, a connection, a coach who had some level of faith in the possibilities for me,
Right.
and just kind of the routine of improving. I remember growing up, and you may or may not know who Pete Maravich is, but Pete Maravich was a
Absolutely.
great basketball player, and I remember reading these books that I don't know, my parents had given us, and I remember this image of this mythology around him that he used to go to a double feature back in the movie theaters, back when people went to movies, but you could go to a double feature, and what he would do is he would sit at the end of one aisle and dribble left-handed for the first feature, and then go to the other end of the aisle and dribble right-handed for the other feature. And so whether that was true or not, the mythology of that really kind of stuck with me. It sticks with me to this day, that if you want to be good, you work at it. And it's often working on the kind of mundane, repetitive things, so it becomes second nature. So I knew I was never going to be fast, and I was kind of coming into my own athletically. But so I worked hard on my stick and my cradling and scooping and passing. I worked less on my ability to cover people, but I figured if I could scoop and move and throw, that there might be an opportunity for me to play at some point.
Right. I'm really happy to hear Pete Maravich be brought up in the podcast. He was sort of the same thing for me. He was the guy that I looked up to, weirdly, when I was growing up. And I started doing something similar. I would, in elementary school, I would walk. It would be about a half-mile walk. I'd walk every day to school, dribbling the basketball left-handed, and then every day back, dribbling the basketball right-handed. Exactly because I don't know if that was because Pete Maravich did it, or maybe I had heard the movie theater story, but it's just funny to hear that be brought up. So can you tell us how you ended up at UMass?
So obviously times were different back then. Recruiting was much different than it is today. I changed over to be a defenseman in the winter of my senior year. Again, my brother had become a great defenseman at Virginia, and he was my idol and someone I looked up to, and who was a hard worker and wanted to be a really good player. And so I changed positions, and I had a good year my senior year of high school. But back then you were already applying to schools, and I wasn't being recruited, and I applied to a variety of places. And back then you're limited, as you are now, by what your parents can afford and how much financial aid you can get and things like that. So I applied to a variety of places. I ended up being admitted at UMass, and my college coach Jack Moran, my high school coach Jack Moran had played and gone to UMass, so he likely put in a good word for me. But I didn't even I matriculated there, and I didn't even bring my equipment because I wasn't recruited. And even though I had received some accolades my senior year, no one had ever contacted me, and I was just going there to go to school and had the majors that I was interested in.
Right.
And so I didn't even bring my equipment. And so I'm there, and again, support from your parents. I remember my father, endorsing me going to the open walk-on tryouts, and I remember him driving my equipment up. My father was a New York City fireman at the time, and he drove after his shift, drove from New York City to Amherst, New Hampshire, brought my equipment, dropped it off. I think he might gave me like a $10 bill and some change for laundry.
Right.
He may have turned the car off. I'm not 100% sure, and turned around and drove home. Probably got a hug and turned around and drove home. And so, I ended up going to missed the first day of tryouts and went and came and made the team, and so that started the path. But I'd be lying if the player I hoped to become, that I continued to do the work to become that player, because I just didn't. And a lot of college coaches, are hypocrites around relative. I've always told all the teams I played for that I probably couldn't play for me. that I didn't have. I didn't have back when I was their age. I didn't have the same. I had the vision,
Right.
but I didn't have the work ethic to do it. And I discovered that later after college, and a real desire to kind of try to outpace my older brother and all the things that he had achieved. But during that time, I ended up making the team, ended up playing for a couple of years, became a very solid player, but not the player I wanted to be, and not the player that my father did that, because I probably wouldn't be on the phone with you and heading down this path at Harvard if he didn't believe in me and drive the 4 hours up to Amherst from New York City after working all night. So that's how I got there. Probably an endorsement from my high school coach and faith from your parents.
And so once you got to UMass, did you feel like the school was the right fit to you, or were there any transition issues? I'm sure making the lacrosse team made it a little bit easier, but how did you feel once you actually got up there?
Going to an all boys Catholic school and then going to being in a co-ed dorm and being in Amherst, which is a tremendous beautiful area with 5 colleges in a really small area. Energy. It's a beautiful college town. It's very different than where I grew up, and so the transition. I think that the difficult transitions that any young person makes is that they're social, they're intellectual, they're athletic on some part. They're dealing with freedoms that maybe you didn't have when you were growing up. So, and then being 18 years old. So that's still difficult now, and just as difficult as it was back in the early 80s. And so the transition athletically was, just starting to believe that you could hang with really, really good players who came from, much more established programs. People always are so impressed when they hear that I played and went to Chaminade. I'm like, yeah, I was on the last losing team there, 1982. Right. So we lost to 3 high schools that don't even exist anymore. Huh. So it's been a nice investment that's appreciated over time. So the athletic transition was difficult because I wasn't coming from having played for a long time. The academically, Chaminade is a powerhouse and prepares you for a volume of work and the ability to write and think critically. Right. So academically, I felt really comfortable. So from a fit standpoint, my feeling on the concept of fit is something that you reflect on kind of after. It's kind of how I think about recruiting when people ask me, "Hey, what do you think of your recruiting class?" And I'm like, "Ask me in 4 years." Right. Because everybody looks good. Everybody's good coming in. They're all Americans and all league and things like that. And I feel like the same way, is that it's one of those things that you wait till you're kind of in the middle of it to determine whether it did or not. And, my generation, we didn't transfer, we didn't come home, we didn't do those kind of things. So you kind of chose what you chose. And if you weren't happy, you found a way to be happy. Right. And if you were happy, you really kind of dove in. I really loved my experience there. And, I double majored there, and I loved everything about my time there, because it was a big school, but it wasn't massive. It was a beautiful town. Right. I had great teammates, and I really immersed myself in my experience there, not just my lacrosse experience.
So when you talk to younger players or parents of younger players, when they're considering what school they should go to, what's your advice for them?
When people who not recruits, but people who are asking my advice on things.
Maybe a freshman in high school, or a parent of a freshman in high school who's saying like, hey, in a couple of years, we're going to have to start thinking through what's the right school for us. How should we think through that?
Well, if they're that age, we can't really speak to them, but let's assume it's my nephew. Sure. So my nephew asked me, I think that, I usually start with just asking a bunch of questions of, what kind of size. You want to be in a big school or a small school? You want to be urban or rural? Do you want to get away from, you want to take the bridge off of Long Island? Do you want to see the country, or do you want to stay close to home?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you start kind of drilling down and start kind of learning. Do you have a sense of, areas of interest that you want to kind of dive into? Because, a lot of schools have areas of focus that they're renowned for or have a really good reputation for. So you can really kind of start honing in, and then I ask questions around, how often do you work on your game, and do you have a rebounder in your back? Where's the wall? Do you go and throw on the wall? Are you playing on a, do you get some, are you coaching yourself? Are you watching film? Do you watch games and things like that? Because a lot of guys want to play. A lot of guys and gals want to play at a high level, but not everyone wants to put the effort and time in to do it. So
right.
If you're all about the great helmet and the cool jersey and the shiny cleats, there's a lot of ways you can go there. But if you're all about kind of the investigation of how good can I be, how much do I care, I'm really passionate about this, I love the work, the struggle is not, is not an obstacle for me. It doesn't impede my progress. I want all those things. And so if that's coming through in kind of the answers that I'm getting, then you can then it becomes, all right, well, next time I'm home, I will come watch you play and give you my insight and assessment, which I don't think I have a crystal ball. I know it's, really good recruiting and forecasting at best is, you're 2/3 right, you hope.
Right.
And
right.
so, I think through the question and answer and the proof, because, saying what you're going to do is much different than doing what you're going to do.
Gotcha.
Oftentimes, the narrower that gap, usually you feel much more confident that someone's going to be able to play at a high level in high school and then have the opportunity to keep on playing.
Gotcha. So, in the interest of time, we're going to jump ahead to, you taking the position at Harvard, even though there were a lot of things that happened before that. But can you jump us ahead? Can you tell us how the position at Harvard came your way?
Well, listen, Harvard wants to be competitive and great in everything that they do. I think that is, a myth that's perpetuated out there that Harvard doesn't care about athletics. What Harvard cares about is excellence. And so when they made a change in their coaching in May, I felt, you hear things through grapevine. I was in the middle of my season at Notre Dame, and so I didn't do any investigation or response to inquiries and things like that for several weeks. And then, when our season ended is when you start hearing from, the people in the administration and the alumni groups and supporters and things like that. So I knew before, our season was over at Notre Dame that I was likely going to be contacted, even though I hadn't done any responses during the whole time in May while we were still in our season. And so, which is what you should do, which is protocol. And so then that started, a several week conversation and courtship.
Gotcha. And so once you found out that you actually got the job, can you talk about what was the first thing you did, besides, trying to figure out where you're going to move your family to, what was day one on campus? What's the first thing you do?
The first thing I did when I got there, when I got the position, was already starting to think about who are the people who I would like to have coach with me, because you can't be good at being a head coach without great people supporting you. Not I'm talking about people and coaches and guys with great work ethic and who are creative and inquisitive and prideful about what they do, in a real collaborative way. And so that, to me, that was, all right, if I do this, are the kind of people and coaches and personalities that I want to have around me. So that's really the first thing that happens is you start thinking about who are the people that can help you start transforming Harvard Lacrosse. You have a vision yourself, so you have an idea. You really assess. You have to really learn where you are. You know where you're trying to get to and where everyone's trying to get to, but it starts with, okay, where are we? So, you contact your current players, you start developing those connections with them and get a sense of talent and personality and all of that. And then you start thinking about who are the coaches that you're going to surround yourself with to help you execute the vision.
Gotcha. And are those, so you mentioned, you talk to the players to get to know them. Are you basing your decision on, who you want to bring in as an assistant coach or assistant coaches based off of the conversations that you're having with your players? Like you determine these are the type of players that I have. This might be a good assistant coach to bring on board. Is that how you're thinking about it? No.
I mean, I knew I was going to coach our defense. And so, starting from that, I don't need somebody who can coach defense if that's what I'm going to do. And I decided early that I knew I wanted, people who can bring, offense, face off, and goalie. And so, it covers everything. And so, Neil Hutchinson, who was with me at Notre Dame, is a great young coach. He's smart. He's creative. He thinks the game. He's an X's and O's guy, but he's very approachable and engaging and inspiring through his knowledge and his personality. So Neil was really easy. The goalie and the face-off piece was more challenging. So Neil was easy, and that was able to happen quickly. The face-off and goalie piece, because there's so many, the professional players who think they want to be college coaches. So you got 2 professional leagues, 3 professional leagues with the indoor league. So you get a lot of inquiry from those guys. Then on the face-off side, you have, a couple $1 million industry on face-offs right now. So you got all these guys who run camps and clinics and things like that. They often are engaged with facing off as well. And so I knew I didn't. There wasn't an anti, industry or anti, professional player thing. I wanted someone who's going to be totally and singularly focused on our players and our program. And so I quickly moved off of the guys who were continuing to play at a really high level. And so Will Corrigan, who played for me at Notre Dame, was a two-way midi at Notre Dame, so I knew if I ever needed his help on defense, he could help me. And I knew he can coach our midfield defense if we needed that. He had run the box before. He had played offense. He's a coach's son. His grandfathers and great uncles were coaches. He's got current uncles who are coaches, and his dad was a coach at Notre Dame, so he's a X's and O's student of the game who had played both ways at Notre Dame. So I know he could bring that, and he had taught himself to become a face-off coach. So I knew he had that multi-faceted skill set, which is really important. And then Ted Bergman was coaching at Cleveland State, and he was an first-team All-American goalie at Wesleyan. So he came from a great program. He's a student of the game. I'd watched a podcast that he had done. He had worked. Neil Hutchinson had told me about him working the Notre Dame camp, and he had just crushed it with his energy and dedication. So those 3 guys, kind of, who are all 30 years old and younger, are the foundation of our program, because they're young and hungry and creative and funny, and they're great personalities but crazy competitive. And so they hit all those buttons. And then we had Al Littell, who had been connected to our program for many years at Harvard in a variety of roles. He stayed on as our director of operations, and Steve Looney, who's a Navy SEAL, who's getting his master's degree at Harvard. He does some team building and culture development stuff for us. So we were able to pretty quickly bring that group together. Not that it wasn't, I didn't know everything I needed to know about Harvard. I still haven't watched a complete Harvard game from the 2019 season, but I could make some assumptions based on some things that I had read about and looked at stats and things like that. I knew we needed to get better in a variety of areas. So it was less about what the team was bringing about, more what I felt strongly about from a skill set for the staff.
Gotcha. So what have been the biggest surprises at the new job so far?
Listen, not surprisingly, the players that the new freshmen and the returning players are very competitive. They're really great people. They're smart. They're hungry and competitive, and not much different than you'd find in any locker room of any Division I or Division II or Division III program. To be on a team, you have great energy. Whether you're winning or losing, they enjoy each other's company. They're fun. They're young. They have that just energy of life, which is just invigorating for me. So me having young staff and inheriting this team, so that's really not surprising. I obviously presume that they would be sad and despondent by the transition and the lack of success in previous years, or not as much. They have the surprising thing, which is really not that surprising, is that their dedication, their hunger, their desire to be good, their desire to represent Harvard in a positive way as students and members of our team.
Right.
I guess the surprising thing is how energized they are, because I know our staff is. They've met and exceeded, our expectations thus far. And, I think the second most surprising thing is, as an outsider who doesn't come from an Ivy League background, is, Harvard can appear to be mysterious and intimidating just because of the place that it holds in our society. And the reality is it has been the opposite, that, the friendliness of the athletic department and just the energy of walking in Harvard Square or Harvard Yard and walking in Cambridge, where the university is located, is people are friendly, they're competitive, they're hungry. There's great things being created there right now as we speak by 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, and I'm sure some of the guys on our team will have tremendous success out in the paths that they pursue. And so I've been dumbfounded by how welcoming Harvard has been, and that's been a big part of our message. It's not this mysterious, intimidating place. It's actually a friendly, open, welcoming, part of the world.
Right. And so, since you've been up there, what have you been most focused on as a team this fall?
I think the concept of hope. That if you do the work and you believe in the vision that we have, and you embrace that process and the struggle and the transformation that we're going through, we're going to be who we want to be at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. And so, for the seniors, they already know that this is their last go. So they're bringing that kind of urgency and that hunger and the disappointment of past seasons. So they've been the engine of our team this fall, because they had to, during that time, the 10 weeks where Harvard didn't have a coach, they were the stewards of the program. Right. And they managed all the new guys coming in and the different workout groups and the internships that they were doing in different parts of the country and different parts of the world. They were communicating with each other and texting. And so they, focusing and make sure as we transition, as the staff got in place, that we didn't get in the way of that. So one of the things that we did was get in the way of that momentum, because there was great momentum. So that's been a focus, like kind of backing off and, reminding the seniors of the role that they play, but also giving them room to lead and manage, because they did such a good job in the summer.
Right.
The second focus has been continuing to understand Harvard so we can articulate it to parents and young people, because what we've discovered, that friendliness and that welcoming and approachable concept of Harvard and the fact that there's people like you. Harvard is an unbelievably diverse place, ethnically, religiously, socioeconomically.
Right.
It's not just, rich people. It's unbelievably diverse in every way that you can imagine. And that from a recruiting standpoint, communicating to parents and kids that there are people like you here and
Right.
that you can do it. Not only can you do it, but you can excel here. And then the Harvard network nationally and globally is ready to open itself up to you that way. And so letting people know that you can do it and that you can excel here academically, that's been a big part of our focus as well. And then the third piece is that Harvard is going to be a powerhouse in lacrosse. And we're looking for, families and young guys who are saying no to other places who are much more established, whose lacrosse brand and sometimes their academic brand are in the same conversation as Harvard. But a lot of times the lacrosse programs they're looking are much more mature and much more established. And the sweatshirt carries much more weight when it says XYZ lacrosse than it does right now when it says Harvard lacrosse. So what we're telling them is that we're going to get there. Right. You're going to help us. And if you want to be a part of transforming something, or do you want to go to something that's already established, or do you want to come change something and change it for the good and for the rest of time, then sign up for this. And the people who've done that, we've been able to get some really, really good players in the 20 class and then already in the 21 class who are saying no to the established program and want the combination of helping, having the incomparable Harvard intellectual experience and combining that with, hey, I want to be able to look back a couple of years from now and say, I was there at the beginning.
Right. And so if you can you talk about what are the values and principles of Harvard Lacrosse?
I'm not big on, posters and things like that can try to encapsulate what you're about. I don't like to talk about kind of what you're about. You kind of want to be about it. And so if I had to answer that question, the only thing that we say in our huddles is commit, because I believe that's both an intellectual and emotional decision. To commit to something is to understand what it is now and what you're trying to do or what you're trying to achieve, and that making an intellectual commitment means you get it. Like, I know what I want, and I know how to go get it. I know what it's going to take. I'm in it intellectually. I can verbalize that. I'm going to do it myself, and I'm also going to do it as part of a group. And I also think it's an emotional thing, because you don't try to get better on your own. You work with your teammates. You work with your classmates. There's an emotional connection to the people that you do it with, and that you do it for, whether it's your parents or your high school or your high school coaches or the people, your mentors, all the people who meant the most to you. So you make these commitments intellectually and emotionally, and you bring everything. And you're going to be imperfect during the process because it's not a straight line. And so commit is the only thing that we say in our huddles. It's the only thing that we say, because you have to say that and you have to mean it.
Right.
You can't fake that. You can't fake that, because if you fake it, it'll get found out eventually, because whatever words you said, you didn't follow it up with action. As far as, so that represents kind of what we're about. As far as kind of values, we've had one team meeting. I'm not big on, getting people together over and over again, but I told them that, there are universal values. And so we don't have to print some binder or hang some sort of poster up with, these are our team values. Team values are the same as life values. Your, selflessness and teamwork and integrity and commitments. And these things are the same things that you're doing when you're a student at Harvard, when you're a member of the Harvard community, when you go back to the town that you live in. Whatever community that you're a member in has some universal values, and they're usually not unique. They don't change from one community to another. They're just universal. So that's what I shared with them, is that let's commit to all the things that you are as a person and as a teammate, and they're self-evident. I don't think we need to hit you over the head with them.
Right. And so, focusing on that one simple value, which I think encompasses a lot, commit. How do you make sure that your players do commit, or that, your team is embodying that value?
Actions speak louder than words. And I told them that at that first and only meeting that we've had, is that your actions will demonstrate them. Mm-hmm. Your actions, how you perform in a drill, how you carry yourself on the academic and residential side of campus, when we do any sort of testing, aerobically or strength-wise, what does your progress look like? Right. Are you coming early? Are you staying late? Are you asking questions? And film, that your actions will demonstrate whether you're committed or not. And, right. I'm not big on enforcement. I don't think enforcement in the classic sense, whether it's punishment or withholding people from things, I don't think that. I firmly believe that doesn't affect long-term behavior. Fear is the worst motivator in the history of man.
Right.
And so collective standards, peer-to-peer challenging, that's powerful, because now why you do things shouldn't be because of the force of my personality, mm-hmm. or how well I speak or how much I can motivate. The behavior that you exhibit should be a function of how you were parented, your belief in those values, Harvard's values, simple standards that we put in place at Harvard. And then, your embracing of those and knowing that you're going to fall short at times, right. Acknowledging them, getting better from them, doing it out of fear or retribution, that doesn't change anybody. That changes people for the short term. And what it often leads to is resentment. I believe that if the clarity of our simple values are accepted by our team, that, our performance in all these areas, academically, as people out on Fridays and Saturday nights in Cambridge, our performance on the field as competitors, all those things will be self-evident. It doesn't
right.
mean you're always perfect. And the standards enforced by your players, not enforced like where players are yelling at each other, but, positive coaching, positive challenging, positive confrontation around hypocrisy and falling short. Mm-hmm. That allows you to have a multiplier effect. It means your team is the engine, right? Your team is the engine. I might be the conductor, but your team is the engine, and that's right. what you want to get to.
Right. Makes sense. And so finally, I am keeping my eye on the clock. What should people expect when they see Harvard Lacrosse play this year?
I think hopefully they see guys who think the game, who can think and execute the game. I think and not just because it's Harvard, but I think if you're a well-coached team, you do things that demonstrate that. And that mm-hmm. typically comes out as this a team that communicates well,
right,
with each other in a very specific language and in a certain way. Do they substitute correctly? Do they come onto the field not surprised, but come from the box already have analyzed what the situation is, so they can cut to the right spot or they can ride to the right spot? And mm-hmm. Do we not get unnecessarily or selfish or stupid penalties out of mm-hmm. fake toughness? And so I hope you see a really intelligent and group of people who think the game, but not mm-hmm. think so much that they get paralyzed by action. So we want to
right.
develop, guys who make plays on instinct, but the instinct comes from intellect. And so we want to be a team that is confident in making plays. So we got an IQ piece, and then we got an instinct and confidence component that comes from like, hey, I feel emboldened and empowered to make plays.
Right.
And because you can't win if you don't make plays. And then the third piece is a relentlessly competitive mm-hmm. group that takes, realize that there's a scoreboard on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And whether there's an actual scoreboard or one just in their mind. So how we do drills and how we teach each other, how they accept the coaching from us, but also how they accept coaching from their teammates. So I expect a competitiveness so that when we leave the field that, whether we won or lost, that our opponents will know that they were in a game with, some ferociously competitive athletes.
Gotcha. Well, Coach, listen, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's obviously always great catching up with somebody from Levittown. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you taking the time.
You're welcome. Thanks for your doing this and allowing myself and Harvard to have this platform.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Joe Yevoli podcast. If you like the podcast, please take a second to give it a positive review on iTunes. This helps more people find the podcast. You can find more episodes on joeyevoli.com. And if you want to be able to ask questions to upcoming guests and suggest topics or interviews you'd like to hear, subscribe to my newsletter at joeyevoli.com. You can follow me on Twitter at joeyevoli. Until next time, keep working and keep getting better.